During Christmas dinner, Grandma asked, "Why does your twin never visit anymore?" I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth, the turkey suddenly feeling like cardboard in my throat. "What twin, Grandma?" My voice came out shakier than I intended. The entire dining room went silent. My mother's wineglass stopped halfway to her lips. My father's knife clattered against his plate. My younger brother, Danny, stopped mid-chew, staring at me with wide eyes. Grandma looked around the table confused, her fork still hovering over her mashed potatoes. "Your twin sister, sweetie. The one who used to come to all the holidays until about 5 years ago. Beautiful girl. Looked just like you, but with longer hair." She turned to my mother with genuine concern. "Is she sick? Is that why we don't talk about her anymore?" My mother's face had gone completely white, and she was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were turning purple. "Mom, please." "Not now." Her voice was barely a whisper, but there was something in it that sounded like fear mixed with warning. "What do you mean, not now?" I set down my fork, my hand starting to shake. "Grandma just said I have a twin sister. Why is this the first I'm hearing about this?" My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Sarah, this isn't the time or place for this conversation." But Grandma wasn't backing down, and I could see the confusion turning to concern on her elderly face. "What are you all talking about? Of course Lily knows about Rebecca. They were inseparable growing up. They dressed the same, finished each other's sentences, did everything together until Rebecca stopped coming around." She looked directly at me now, studying my face carefully. "Honey, are you feeling all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees as everyone stared at each other in uncomfortable silence. Danny pushed his plate away, his teenage appetite apparently vanished. "Mom, Dad, what the hell is Grandma talking about? Lily doesn't have a twin. She's an only child except for me." But even as he said it, I could see doubt creeping into his expression. My mother stood up and walked to the china cabinet, her movements stiff and mechanical like someone in shock. She opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a photo album I'd never seen before, its cover dusty and worn like it had been hidden away for years. "I didn't want you to find out this way," she said quietly, setting the album on the table in front of me. "We thought it would be easier if you just forgot. The doctor said it was possible, that trauma could erase memories if they were painful enough." My hands trembled as I opened the album, and what I saw inside made my breath catch in my throat. Photos of 2 identical little girls, maybe 4 or 5 years old, wearing matching pink dresses and holding hands. 2 girls blowing out birthday candles together, opening Christmas presents together, playing in a backyard I recognized as ours. In every single photo, one of the girls was me. I could tell by the small birthmark on my left wrist that I'd had since birth. The other girl looked exactly like me but had slightly longer hair and was wearing a small silver bracelet I didn't recognize. "Who is this?" My voice cracked as I pointed to the other girl in the photos. "That's Rebecca," my father said heavily, sitting back down like his legs could no longer support him. "Your identical twin sister. You two were born together, grew up together, did everything together until you were 16 years old." The room started spinning as I flipped through page after page of evidence that I'd had a sister, a twin sister, that I had absolutely no memory of whatsoever. Photos of us at Halloween dressed as matching witches, at the beach building sandcastles together, at school concerts standing side by side. In one photo, we were teenagers, maybe 14 or 15, with our arms around each other and identical smiles that showed we were genuinely close. Why don't I remember any of this? I was starting to hyperventilate, and Danny reached over to grip my hand, his face pale with shock. "Where is Rebecca now? What happened to her?" My parents exchanged a look that communicated volumes without words, the kind of look that comes from years of keeping a painful secret. "Rebecca died 5 years ago," my mother said finally, tears streaming down her face. "You were both 16, and there was an accident. You were in the car together when it happened, and you were driving." The words hit me like physical blows, each one making it harder to breathe. "I killed my twin sister?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. "And I don't remember any of it?" My father shook his head quickly. "It wasn't your fault. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit the passenger side where Rebecca was sitting. You survived with minor injuries, but Rebecca died at the scene." He paused, struggling with his next words. "You were so traumatized by her death that you completely shut down. You spent 3 months in a psychiatric facility, unable to speak, unable to eat, barely able to function. When you finally started recovering, you had no memory of Rebecca at all. The psychiatrist said your brain had essentially erased her existence as a coping mechanism because the guilt and grief were too overwhelming to process." Grandma was crying now too, her hands shaking as she reached for her water glass. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I didn't know you'd forgotten. I have dementia, and sometimes I forget what I'm supposed to remember, and remember what I'm supposed to forget." She looked at my parents with devastation in her eyes. "You should have told me she didn't remember Rebecca. I would never have brought it up like this." But I was barely listening to her apology because my mind was racing through 16 years of memories, looking for any trace of the sister I'd apparently lost. How could I forget an entire person? How could I have no memory whatsoever of growing up with a twin? I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through old photos, but there was nothing from before 5 years ago. No childhood photos, no teenage photos, nothing that showed Rebecca's existence in my digital life. Where are all my old photos? My social media only goes back 5 years. My mother's face crumpled further. "We deleted everything. The psychiatrist said it would help you heal if you weren't constantly confronted with reminders of Rebecca. We removed all the photos from your room, archived your old social media accounts, even changed some of the stories we told about your childhood to exclude her. You erased her," I said, and the anger in my voice surprised everyone, including myself. "You erased my twin sister from my entire life like she never existed." My father tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. "We were trying to help you, Lily. You were suicidal. You tried to hurt yourself multiple times in the hospital. The doctor said the only way you might recover was if we let you forget." Danny was staring at the photo album with tears running down his face. "I was 11 when this happened. I remember Rebecca. She used to help me with my homework and let me hang out with you guys even when you didn't want a little brother around." He looked at me with something like accusation in his eyes. "How could you forget her? How could you just erase our sister like she never mattered?" His words cut deep because he was right. Even if I couldn't control what my traumatized brain had done, I felt guilty for forgetting someone who had apparently been such a huge part of my life. "I need to know everything. I said, closing the photo album carefully. I need to know who Rebecca was, what she was like, what happened that night. I need to remember my sister. The rest of Christmas dinner was forgotten, as my parents spent the next 3 hours telling me about Rebecca, about the life we'd shared together that I couldn't remember. They told me how we'd been born 2 minutes apart, with me arriving first. How we'd had our own twin language until we were 3 years old. How we'd been so identical that even they had trouble telling us apart sometimes, and we'd use that to play tricks on teachers and babysitters. You two were inseparable, my mother said, pulling out more photo albums from the hidden depths of the china cabinet. Rebecca was the more outgoing one, always making friends and starting conversations. You were quieter, more thoughtful, but together you balanced each other out perfectly. She showed me photos of birthday parties where Rebecca was clearly the center of attention while I hung back watching. Photos of school plays where Rebecca took the lead role while I worked backstage. Photos that showed two halves of a whole that I couldn't remember being part of. What was she like as a person? I asked, needing details that went beyond the photos. My father smiled sadly. Rebecca was funny, sometimes too funny. She'd make jokes at inappropriate times and get you both in trouble. She loved animals, wanted to be a veterinarian. She was terrible at math, but amazing at art. She could draw anything after seeing it just once. He pulled out a sketchbook from another drawer, and I realized he'd been hiding these things around the house for years, keeping Rebecca's memory alive in secret while helping me forget. The sketchbook was filled with beautiful drawings, landscapes, portraits, animals, and repeated sketches of a girl who I realized was me. Rebecca had drawn her twin sister over and over, capturing expressions and moments that showed how well she'd known me. On the last page of the sketchbook was a drawing of the two of us sitting back to back, looking in opposite directions but connected. Written underneath in flowing handwriting were the words, "Two halves of one soul." "Tell me about the accident," I said, even though I could see the pain it caused my parents to revisit that night. My mother took a deep breath. "It was December 20th, 5 years ago. You two were coming home from a Christmas party at your friend's house. You were driving because Rebecca had a headache and didn't feel up to it. You were only 2 blocks from home when a drunk driver ran a red light and hit the passenger side going 60 miles an hour. She paused, wiping tears from her eyes. Rebecca died instantly. The doctor said she didn't suffer, that the impact killed her before she could feel pain. You were physically fine except for a broken wrist and some bruises, but mentally you were completely destroyed." My father continued the story when my mother couldn't. "You kept screaming that it should have been you driving on the passenger side, that you should have died instead of her. You said you couldn't live without your other half, that you felt like half a person." Danny spoke up quietly from his end of the table. "I remember you in the hospital. You just stared at the wall for days. You wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat, wouldn't acknowledge anyone. It was like you died too, but your body just hadn't figured it out yet." He looked down at his hands. "Mom and Dad were scared they were going to lose both daughters. I was scared I was going to lose my big sister." The psychiatrist reports, which my parents showed me with reluctance, painted a picture of severe trauma and dissociative amnesia. The doctors had documented how I'd progressively lost memories of Rebecca, first forgetting the accident, then forgetting the days leading up to it, then weeks, then months, until eventually my brain had erased her entirely from my conscious memory. "It's called dissociative amnesia," my mother explained. "Your brain essentially deleted the memories that were causing you unbearable pain. The doctors said it was rare but not unheard of, especially in cases of extreme trauma and survivor's guilt. But how did I function?" I asked, trying to understand how I could forget an entire person and still live a normal life. All my memories from before the accident must have involved her. How did I not notice the holes? My father explained that our brains are remarkably good at filling in gaps and rewriting narratives to make sense of our experiences. "You essentially rewrote your childhood in your mind, editing Rebecca out of every memory and replacing her with other people or with yourself alone. Your brain turned shared experiences into solo experiences, group photos into individual moments. The few times someone mentioned Rebecca in front of you, you seemed to not even hear it, like your brain was actively filtering out information that contradicted your new reality. It sounded impossible, but the evidence was overwhelming. I'd somehow managed to live 5 years without any conscious memory of having had a twin sister, and apparently no one had challenged my reconstructed memories until Grandma's dementia had betrayed the family secret. Did I have any friends who knew Rebecca?" I asked, thinking about my current friend group who I'd apparently only met in the last 5 years. "What about the friends we had together before the accident?" My mother's expression grew even more pained. "You cut ties with everyone who knew you before the accident. You said being around them reminded you of things you couldn't quite remember and it made you anxious. You transferred to a different school for your senior year, made completely new friends who never knew Rebecca existed, essentially started a new life. That explained why my oldest friendships only dated back to senior year of high school, why I had no childhood friends, why my social circle seemed so shallow compared to other people's deep lifelong connections. I'd been running from my own memories without even knowing it. The few friends who tried to stay in touch and talk about Rebecca, you blocked them," Danny added quietly. "I remember one girl, Macy or Mackenzie or something, who came to the house crying saying you wouldn't return her calls. Mom had to explain that you didn't remember your previous life and it was better if people from before just stayed away. I felt sick thinking about all the people I'd apparently abandoned, all the relationships I'd destroyed because they threatened my false sense of reality. Does the drunk driver who caused the accident know what happened to me?" The question came out before I could stop it, and I saw my parents exchange another loaded glance. "The drunk driver died at the scene," my father said carefully. "But there's something else you should know about that night. Something we've never told you because the doctors advised against it." My heart started racing because I could tell from his tone that whatever he was about to say would be devastating. "The drunk driver who hit you was your Uncle Raymond, my brother." The room started spinning again as I processed this information. Mom's brother was drunk driving and killed his own niece? My father shook his head slowly. No, Raymond was my brother, your uncle. He'd been struggling with alcoholism for years and we'd tried to get him help multiple times. That night he'd gotten drunk at a bar, decided to drive home, and ran the red light that ended Rebecca's life. I don't understand, I said, though part of me was starting to see the horrifying picture coming together. Why would you keep this from me? My mother answered this time. Because you and Raymond were close before the accident. He was your favorite uncle, always taking you and Rebecca on adventures, teaching you things, making you laugh. When you woke up in the hospital and learned that Raymond had caused the accident while driving drunk, you completely broke. You said you hated him, that you'd never forgive him, that you hoped he'd died suffering. She wiped fresh tears from her eyes, and then you said you hated yourself for not hating him enough, because part of you still loved your uncle even though he'd killed your sister. The guilt of having conflicted feelings about Raymond on top of the survivor's guilt from the accident is what pushed you over the edge into complete psychological breakdown. The psychiatrist had recommended that when I eventually lost my memories of Rebecca, the family should also let me forget about Raymond and his role in the accident. It was easier to let you think Raymond had just moved away or that you'd never been close to him than to risk you remembering the truth and having another breakdown. Grandma spoke up again, her voice trembling with age and emotion. Raymond never forgave himself. He went to Rebecca's funeral and stood in the back, crying through the whole service. He tried to talk to you, to apologize, but you screamed at him until security removed him from the funeral home. She reached across the table to grip my hand with surprising strength. He killed himself 3 months later, left a note saying he couldn't live with what he'd done to his brother's family, that he deserved to die for taking Rebecca from us. I pulled my hand away, overwhelmed by the cascade of tragedies I was learning about. Not only had I lost a twin sister I couldn't remember, but I'd also lost an uncle I'd apparently loved, and both deaths were connected to one terrible moment that had shattered multiple lives. Why did he take away Rebecca and not me? The question came out as a whisper, but everyone heard it. Why did my brain decide to forget Rebecca, instead of forgetting the accident or forgetting myself or finding some other way to cope? Danny answered before our parents could. Because losing Rebecca was more painful than anything else that happened. More painful than the physical injuries, more painful than losing Uncle Raymond, even more painful than the guilt of surviving. The psychiatrist said that your bond with Rebecca was so deep, so fundamental to your sense of self, that when she died it was like losing a limb or losing half your soul. Your brain couldn't process that kind of loss, so it just deleted her existence to stop the pain. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. But Danny, I never forgot you. I remember you as my little brother through my whole childhood. Why could I remember you but not Rebecca? My mother had clearly thought about this question before. Because your relationship with Danny was different. He was your little brother, someone you took care of and protected, but he wasn't your twin. Losing Danny would have been devastating, but losing Rebecca was losing part of yourself. Twins have a connection that's different from regular siblings, especially identical twins like you two. You shared everything, the same DNA, the same face, the same birthday, the same bedroom growing up. Rebecca wasn't just your sister. She was your mirror image, and when she died, you couldn't look in a mirror anymore without seeing her absence. I stood up abruptly, needing to move, needing to do something with the nervous energy coursing through my body. I need to see her grave. I need to see where Rebecca is buried. My parents exchanged another glance, and I could see they were debating whether this was a good idea. Lily, maybe we should wait. Talk to a therapist first. Make sure you're emotionally prepared for this, my mother said gently. But I was already grabbing my coat from the hallway closet. You've been keeping this secret for 5 years. You've let me live in a false reality where my twin sister never existed. The least you can do is take me to her grave and let me try to remember. My father must have seen the determination in my face because he stood up and grabbed his keys. I'll drive you. But Lily, you need to prepare yourself. This might not bring back your memories, and it might be more painful than you're expecting. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without crying, and followed him out to the car. The cemetery was 20 minutes from our house, and we drove in complete silence. My mind was racing with questions I didn't know how to ask, memories that felt like they should be there but weren't, and a growing sense of grief for a person I couldn't remember losing. When we pulled up to the cemetery gates, my father parked the car but didn't immediately get out. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked quietly. Once you see her grave, once you accept that she was real and that she's gone, you can't unknow it. I nodded and opened the car door, stepping out into the cold December evening. The cemetery was decorated with Christmas lights and wreaths, which felt surreal given the circumstances. My father led me down a winding path past rows of headstones until we stopped in front of a simple grey marble gravestone with gold lettering. It read, Rebecca Ann Mitchell, beloved daughter, sister and friend. Born July 14th, 2004, died December 20th, 2019. Forever in our hearts, forever missed, forever loved. Two halves of one soul, separated but never apart. I fell to my knees in front of the gravestone, my legs giving out as the reality hit me. This was real. I'd had a twin sister named Rebecca who died 5 years ago, and I'd completely forgotten she existed. The grave was well maintained, with fresh flowers despite the winter weather, and I realized my parents must have been coming here regularly all these years while keeping it secret from me. I'm so sorry, I whispered to the gravestone, tears streaming down my face. I'm so sorry I forgot you. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. I'm so sorry you died and I lived. My father knelt down beside me and put his arm around my shoulders. Rebecca wouldn't want you to feel guilty, Lily. She loved you more than anything in the world. The last thing she said before you two left for that party was that she loved you and she was glad you were her twin. His voice broke on the last word, and I realized he was crying too. She wouldn't want you to spend your life mourning her. She'd want you to live enough for both of you. We sat there in the cold for what felt like hours, me crying into my hands while my father held me and occasionally shared memories of Rebecca that he thought might help me understand who she'd been. He told me about the time Rebecca had convinced me to dye our hair different colors so people could tell us apart, but we'd switched colors halfway through because we missed being identical. He told me about Rebecca's terrible singing voice and how she'd sing loudly in the car just to make me laugh. He told me about the secret language we'd developed and how even he and my mother couldn't always understand what we were communicating with, just looks and small gestures. Each story felt like a knife to my heart because I should remember these things, I should have these memories, but my brain had locked them away somewhere I couldn't access. Will I ever remember her? I asked. though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. My father sighed heavily. The psychiatrist said it's possible that with therapy and time, some memories might come back. But they also warned that remembering could be re-traumatizing, that there's a reason your brain chose to forget. You'd have to decide whether you want to try to remember or whether you want to move forward knowing about Rebecca, but accepting that the memories might be gone forever. We drove back home in silence, but this time it felt different. I wasn't empty or confused anymore. I was filled with grief for a sister I couldn't remember, and anger at a world that had taken her from me and then made me forget she'd ever existed. When we walked back into the house, I could hear my mother and grandmother talking quietly in the kitchen. Danny was sitting on the couch looking at his phone, but he jumped up when he saw me. "Are you okay?" he asked, and the genuine concern in his teenage voice made me want to cry again. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I don't know what okay even means anymore." My mother came out of the kitchen and immediately pulled me into a hug. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry we kept this from you for so long. We thought we were protecting you, but maybe we were just protecting ourselves from having to watch you grieve all over again." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bedroom, the same bedroom I'd apparently shared with Rebecca until she died, and tried to remember anything about her. I stared at the walls, wondering which bed had been hers, which side of the closet she'd used, where she'd kept her things. The room felt empty in a way it hadn't before, like I could now sense the absence of someone who should be there. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went to the attic, remembering that my parents had mentioned storing Rebecca's things there after I demanded they remove all reminders of her from my sight. I found boxes labeled with her name, filled with clothes, books, art supplies, school papers, and personal items that told the story of a 16-year-old girl whose life had been cut short. I pulled out a diary and hesitated before opening it, feeling like I was invading someone's privacy even though that someone was my own twin sister. The entries were dated from the year before she died, and as I read them, I got a picture of who Rebecca had been beyond what my parents had told me. "Lily was in a mood today," one entry read. "She's been stressed about college applications and taking it out on everyone. I tried to make her laugh by doing impressions of our teachers, but she just rolled her eyes. Sometimes I wish she'd relax a little, but I know she's just scared about the future. I'm scared too, but I deal with it by joking around, and she deals with it by trying to control everything. We're so different but so the same." Another entry from a few weeks later. "I had a fight with Lily today about which colleges we should apply to. She wants us to go to the same school so we can room together, but I kind of want to try being independent, having my own identity separate from being a twin. I didn't tell her that though because I know it would hurt her feelings. Maybe I'm being selfish. She's my best friend, and I can't imagine life without her. But sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be just Rebecca instead of Rebecca and Lily." The entry made my chest ache because I realized Rebecca had died before she could ever find out who she was as an individual. Person separate from being a twin. The last entry in the diary was dated December 19th, 2019, the day before she died. "Christmas party at Melissa's house tomorrow night. Lily is designated driver because I have a headache and don't feel like dealing with drunk people. She's being annoying about it, saying I always make her drive and I need to get my license renewed. I told her I'd drive next time, but honestly I hate driving and she's better at it anyway. I'm lucky to have a twin who puts up with my laziness. I don't tell her enough how much I appreciate her. Tomorrow I'm going to tell her that I love her and I'm glad she's my sister. Life would be boring without Lily." I closed the diary and pressed it against my chest, sobbing quietly in the dark attic. Rebecca had planned to tell me she loved me the next day, but she'd never gotten the chance because she died that night. And I'd forgotten she existed, forgotten that someone had loved me that much, forgotten that I'd once been part of something bigger than myself. Over the next few weeks, I started seeing a therapist who specialized in dissociative amnesia and trauma recovery. Dr. Sarah Winters was patient and non-judgmental as I told her everything I'd learned about Rebecca and the accident. "What you're experiencing is complicated grief," she explained during one of our sessions. "You're grieving someone you can't remember, which means you're essentially grieving twice, once for the actual loss of your sister, and once for the loss of all the memories you had with her." She recommended a treatment approach that would gradually expose me to information about Rebecca while monitoring my emotional responses, with the goal of either helping me recover memories or helping me create new understanding of who Rebecca was based on external information. "Some patients with dissociative amnesia do recover their memories eventually," Dr. Winters said, "but some never do, and they have to learn to live with the gaps in their history. We'll work on both possibilities, trying to help you remember while also helping you accept that you might not." The therapy was exhausting and often painful. Dr. Winters had me look at photos of Rebecca and describe what I saw, trying to trigger any buried memories. She had me visit places that had been significant to Rebecca and me, like our old elementary school or the park where we'd played as children. She even had me meet with some of our mutual friends from before the accident, people I'd cut out of my life who remembered both of us. One friend named Kelsey broke down crying when she saw me. "I've missed you so much," she said, hugging me tightly. "After Rebecca died and you shut everyone out, it felt like I'd lost both of you." She spent 2 hours telling me stories about adventures the three of us had shared, about inside jokes I couldn't remember, about the dynamics of our friendship, where Rebecca had been the wild one, and I'd been the responsible one trying to keep us out of trouble. "You two were like yin and yang," Kelsey said. "Completely different but perfectly balanced. Rebecca made you more fun and spontaneous, and you made Rebecca more thoughtful and careful. When she died, it was like watching half of you disappear. Slowly, over months of therapy, tiny fragments started coming back. Not full memories, but flashes of moments. Rebecca's laugh, the way her hand felt holding mine, the smell of her strawberry shampoo. One day, I was driving past a coffee shop and suddenly remembered sitting there with Rebecca, both of us drinking hot chocolate and complaining about a math test. The memory hit me so hard I had to pull over and catch my breath, crying in the parking lot as I realized it was the first real memory I'd recovered. Dr. Winters warned me that the returning memories might not be linear or complete, that I might remember random moments while still having gaps in major events. Your brain is protecting you by letting memories return slowly, in manageable pieces, she explained. If everything came back at once, it might be overwhelming and could cause another breakdown. So I learned to be patient with myself, to accept the fragments as gifts rather than mourning what was still missing. My relationship with my parents improved as they opened up more about Rebecca and stopped trying to protect me from painful truths. My mother started sharing stories at dinner, reminiscing about funny things Rebecca had done or said. My father took me to Rebecca's grave every month, and we'd sit there together talking to her, telling her about our lives, asking her questions we'd never get answers to. Danny and I grew closer too, bonded by our shared grief and his memories of the sister I was still trying to piece together. You're different than you were before Rebecca died, he told me one day. Before, you were lighter somehow, more confident. After she died and you forgot her, you became more serious, more guarded, like you were afraid of getting close to people in case they disappeared too. His observation made sense, of course. I'd developed trust issues and emotional walls after experiencing trauma I couldn't consciously remember, but that my body and subconscious clearly hadn't forgotten. A year after that Christmas dinner where everything changed, I went back to the cemetery alone. It was December 20th, the 5-year anniversary of Rebecca's death, and the 1-year anniversary of me learning she existed. I brought flowers and a letter I'd written to her, trying to express everything I'd learned and felt over the past year. Dear Rebecca, the letter began. I'm sorry it took Grandma's dementia for me to find out about you. I'm sorry I forgot you existed and let everyone erase you from my history. I'm sorry you died and I lived, and I'm sorry I spent 5 years living a life that should have included you. I read the entire letter out loud at her grave, not caring if other cemetery visitors thought I was crazy. I'm trying to remember you, trying to piece together who you were and who we were together. I've recovered some memories now, fragments of moments, the sound of your voice, the way you made me laugh. It's not much, but it's something. Doctor, Winter says I might never remember everything, that some memories might be lost forever. But I'm okay with that now because I know you were real, I know you mattered, and I know you loved me even if I can't remember loving you back. As I stood to leave, I noticed something I'd missed before. On the back of Rebecca's gravestone was an inscription I hadn't seen on my first visit. Until we meet again, save a place for me where the twins can be together once more. My mother must have added that inscription later, a promise that someday, somehow, Rebecca and I would be reunited and whole again. The thought gave me comfort even though I wasn't sure I believed in an afterlife. I took a photo of the inscription and set it as my phone wallpaper, a constant reminder of the sister I'd lost and found and lost again in different ways. Living with this knowledge was harder than living in ignorance, but it was also more honest, more real, and ultimately more meaningful. I was no longer living a lie or hiding from a truth that shaped who I was. I was facing my history, however painful, and learning to carry the weight of loss while still moving forward with my life. Thanks for exploring all these questions with me today. It's been a pretty curious little journey to share together. Until next time, take care. Subscribe for more content like this.